Greetings, this is Michael Erlewine, and I'm going to talk a little bit about samsara. And samsara, as most of you know, is just another word for this cyclic life that we're living in. And I also want to talk about what happens when we die and go into what are called the Bardos. And within that Bardo is a time when, so it's written, I don't know, where we're exposed to very clear, brilliant white light, and how we react to it very much affects our future lives, our future rebirths. So with that in mind, I'm going to just launch into it, and I know that some of you are not going to be able to follow this or interested, but it's just for those who are interested. If life for us is spent mostly avoiding the clear light of the mind, because remember, what's called the clear light of the mind isn't just available to us in the Dharma. It's here right now. We just have habitually ignored it. We don't look at it, so we've never seen it. But when we leave this life, when we die, we're going to be stripped of all the attachments and the obscurations we have now, and we're going to have no choice but to look right at it. So anyway, if life for us is spent mostly avoiding the clear light of the mind, which is, as I mentioned, almost the definition of samsara, and instead we secret and surround ourselves within our habits and our entertainments constantly, wrapped tight like a mummy, then what is this life we're living? And if according to the Dharma teachings, we have never, not ever, known enlightenment in all our rebirths up to now, but instead have been tightly wrapped in samsara, in our own attachment, what kind of life is that? I mean, what does it consist of? And is that all there is to life as we know it? And if all of our ideas about enlightenment are themselves mostly just more entertainment, just more attachment piling it on, what then is enlightenment, if not the process of removing what obstructs and blocks out the natural light of the mind so that we can see it? Isn't that just what Dharma practice is? And in the Dharma teachings, we are definitely told that at death, all of this applied veneer, all of these attachments, all this obscuration is going to be stripped away and left behind to decay and disintegrate after we have gone, whatever we are. And in the Bardo, without samsara, without all this cover, we're going to be, and this is repeated endlessly, very, very, very sensitive to everything and anything. So how does this all go together and work for us? And it seems that we're being encouraged by the teachings to start exposing our very thin skin, which we have now, while we're still living, so that we can begin to see and endure the light of the mind without being frightened, without terror, as it's said we're going to have after death. Now, what I discovered for myself is not, as a superficial read of the Dharma text might suggest, that our attachments are something that we can just see and manipulate. Rather, it seems that we have almost no idea whatsoever how deeply we are entrenched and encased in samsara. And for all our Dharma practice, in my case many decades, we may have yet to make a dent in our self-encasement as far as far as entertainments and distractions concerned. It seems like we're pretty much bound airtight. And the reason is simple, that we don't want to remove. We don't want to come out of our entertainments. Perhaps if only because of habit and fear of the unknown. And perhaps all our Dharma goings on, all this practicing, are just a form of lip service to liberation, rather than any real step toward actual liberation from samsara. In other words, our habit and habits of samsara has even programmed our steps to escape from it. In short, we're content just as we are. We like it like this. We're used to it. Now, I learned about this from having a major stroke. And what I learned from my stroke experience is while I still had some memories, they were too distant. They were veiled from access. I couldn't reach them. I could not, or perhaps I did not care enough to bring them to mind. I wasn't able to. Yet, try as I might, I could not reach any familiar cover, and thus once again lose myself in distractions and entertainment as I'm so used to. In other words, being entertained all the time was at the time of the stroke and quite a long time afterwards simply not possible. Stark boredom and ennui were the order of the day. This was a kind of suffering I was unfamiliar with. And yet this too is part of our familiarization with the nature of how the mind works, with the nature of the mind, this suffering of exposure and vulnerability. Of more immediate importance to me was that I had zero access to things I was normally attached to, like music, food, and all the comforts I was used to, the enjoyment of them. I could not get anything to satisfy me or to get into and lose myself as I was used to in enjoyment, as I had, always have been. It was like I was stark naked of any comfort whatsoever. Samsara was so transparent, like nothing at all. And when I tried to go there, to get wrapped up again in something, I could not get there. There was no room in the inn, so to speak. I was left out in the blinding sun of the mind to just burn and endure and adjust. So instead of my usual comforts, as mentioned, I was just out there fully exposed to this blinding white light, as if I were on a wide desert plain with nothing as far as I could see, nothing except this single intense white light somewhere overhead, which I was turned away from because I could not stand to look at it, even look in its direction. I agree this is an austere account and sounds bleak because, to my knowledge, it is bleak. And our accumulated cravings, desires, and immaculate skill in being entertained constantly builds up a dam that keeps us from removing our accumulated obscurations and thus beginning to thin down our reification so that we can transition at death more easily to being without the self and distraction.